And this was not, the vision that was set out for me. And I wait patiently for something else. And there were times I had gotten discouraged about it, but it wasn't a time that I had went through a depression. Because I just feel like even though you grow up and you're always told, it does help to know that is in there, at some point, and you can go back to those old messages and those old words that people have, said and shared with you, and then pull those back out while you're actually going through it. So I guess in the lack of better terms, like if you recognize what people are saying, that people are saying, hey, there's going to be a time when you're going to have to really lean on him, and you're going to have to really lean into the vision that he has for you. I think you just go into certain situations with a different set of eyes, and you're like, okay, this is it. That's what they meant. And that's what helped me. So tying it back to my mother, I think there was probably no one there to, break all that down for her. I think she was just going through it. And I think that she was just going through the motions, but going through it only with her and God, right. Which is such a powerful story. I just always, am amazed. And when I think about it, I guess when I talk about it, even now, I still feel like, wow, that was a lot of faith and a lot of courage that a single black woman who was in her 40s, well, she was just 40, but who was 40, had to have.
How does your beginning serve as a guide for you today? Your beginning and where you came from, how does that guide you today?
I think, honestly, it's guided me in my moral character, mm-hmm. in developing a stronger moral compass every day, because I don't want to compare myself to anyone else, but in comparison to how I probably was before when I was younger, to how I was in my 20s, to now how I was in my mid-20s, to now, going into my 30s. I think that this same story will mean something different when I'm 35, when I'm 40, mm-hmm. when I'm 45. So I think that it has just been one of those, I think it's been a very precise tool in helping me define who I am throughout my life journey. Mm-hmm. So it meant something different to me when I was 25 or 26 or 23. But it means something totally different to me now as I'm 30. Because I'm able to kind of cull out from that example or from that story, okay, little different examples. Like, okay, like when I talked about my biological mom, I didn't know that I think I knew kind of like, hey, she's giving you up because she can't take care of you. But you don't know that for sure. Well, I didn't know that for sure until I actually read it 4 months ago. So now this whole story, even though it's the same story, I have a new piece to it, and it's taught me more about sacrifice, And so not only was the story about, leading into God and having faith, but there's another, element to it that talks a little bit about, well, for me, that talks to me about sacrifice. And having to sacrifice, and I don't know what what that's going to look like in the next couple of, months or years. I don't think I'm in somewhere in my life now where I drastically need to sacrifice for some, for mm-hmm. someone, or, I'm not trying to sound selfish, but what I'm trying to say. I just know that that's a different meaning to me. And it just helps me be more cognizant of, okay, do I need to sacrifice more, or am I sacrificing enough for friends? I'm not in a relationship, so I'm not sacrificing for that. Or am I sacrificing enough for family? So that's what that story kind of does for me now as a 30-year-old.
Gotcha.
I'll be honest with you. When we first thought about your story and this topic, we were more so attracted to the fact that you were born from a prostitute and that you are successful.
Oh, yeah.
But what I'm hearing is you were born from a woman that sacrificed it all so that you could have a real chance at life. You were born and adopted by your mom, who heard the voice of God. Mm-hmm. And these ultimately are two women of faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's just amazing to me, because statistically, you're not supposed to be a success story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right.
And, talk to us more about, like, what drives you, what motivates you.
I think what motivates me the most is, like, when my mom told me I was adopted she told me, like, when I was 4 or 5. Because I remember her sitting me down. I remember her distinctively saying, hey, I want to let you know, because I don't want you to find out from anyone else. This is the deal. You're adopted. And I didn't know, as a 4 or 5-year, I didn't know what that even meant. And then I had to go away. I'm sorry. Well, yeah, I did go away. But my mom went away to Korea. So I lived in Mobile, and my sister lived Mobile, Alabama, and my sister lived in Austin, Texas. So the family members that I stayed with were obviously not my biological members, but I think she was preparing me for, like, living alone without her for about a year, mm-hmm. and she didn't want me to hear from other people. But she always used to tell me that, you're special because, unlike a family or a child being given to, God giving them to a traditional family, you were chosen. Which is a bit different in the sense that, you were specifically chosen to be in this family. I mean, it's not a large family; it's just me and my sister and my mom, But that drives me. I think that how can I put it? Oh, Oprah said this really one time on her masterclass. She was talking about how, and I could relate to it, how some people, when they get to have babies, and they have, like, a baby shower, and they get they get all these different presents. They're in a position of expectation for that child, and then that child is is waiting to arrive. When I think about my situation, where there was no one on the other side who was like, "Oh, he's coming," there's a baby shower for her. None of that was going on. But it just made me today, because that was what the question was. It makes me more grateful for what I have than anything. I've never been sad about being adopted. And who knows, I might, there might be a little bit more passion there to kind of find out who she is and see if she's still alive. I don't know I don't know the first step to doing that would be. But I think for now, like your question was, what does it relate to me today? It's me being grateful, because even though there was not a sense of anticipation for me to arrive with her, but there definitely was a sense of anticipation from my adopted mother and my adopted sister. And that just makes me so much grateful for everything I have today. The fact that I was chosen into a family versus just being given to a family. I just think it definitely heightens your sense of gratefulness, your attitude towards other people, your willingness to be kind to people. And I just feel like those have been my main motivations because of my own personal story.
One of the things that I can personally say is that you have been one of the most consistent and loyal people in my life. And when you finally shared that story with me, it kind of made sense to me why. Mm-hmm. Like, you're very, 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 very loyal because of all the principles and all the things that you just stated. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, because you didn't know, like, nobody knew.
No.
And that's a totally different story.
Ooh,
but we don't have to. But it just came out of nowhere, and I had to go back and tell my closest friends, who, like Jamel, but I have known him since, I was 10. Whenever I moved to Charleston, like 9 or 10. And he never knew. And he never really asked questions about, like, hey, where's your real dad? Or where's your dad? I don't think not that I can remember, but even like my best friend, no one knew. Except for, like, people who had been friends of my mom's. They knew. But I never had talked about it or spoken about it until I was forced to. In a sense, I don't want to say I was forced to, but I felt like I needed to, because it had kind of gotten out, by accident, Or maybe, I don't know, I wouldn't even say accident. I think it was intentional. But anyway, that's a different story.
Wow. I mean, to you listening, Marcellus was going to be anonymous, but at the last minute, he's like, no, I don't mind sharing my identity because this is your story.
Yeah. And
I think it's not only your story, but it's powerful. For those of you listening, when we, as Marcus originally said, at first we wanted to highlight, being the son of a prostitute, and then how do you go from that to being successful. And we thought of that because, Marcellus is recently just turned 30 and he's on his way to his doctorate.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, not only is he one of my most loyal friends, but he's one of the ones that I'm proud of the most because I know his narrative and I know his story. And I'm so absolutely glad and grateful that he, along with, some of the others that we've had on our show, have taken their pen back and decided to write their own narrative. And even if it includes details that you had absolutely no control over, you still have the pen and you still have the ability to finish the story. Well, not only just finish, but write the story from this point in your life now and finish it. And I really can honestly say that you have done that, Marcellus.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that some things are innate and some things aren't. Some things are just learned. I think for me, it was just a mix of both. Going through life, you try things out, they don't work. Try this out, this works. Practice that more. But I think you're right. And I think for me, this has been more of embracing this story. Mm-hmm. Because when I was younger, my mom, the second piece of that story was when she told me when I was adopted, hey, you're adopted, I don't want you to find out from anyone else. But the other piece to it was, but don't tell anyone. And I don't think that my mom meant for me to tell anyone. I don't think how can I word this? I don't think her intent was to tell me not to share this story because I should be ashamed of it. I think she was trying to protect me from questions I probably wasn't yet able to answer because I couldn't comprehend it. But for me as a kid, as a 4 or 5 year old kid, the way I processed it was that it was something I should be ashamed of. Mm. And so and then living in Charleston, South Carolina, where everybody is related, that really was tough. That was pretty tough. But I think now, my 28, 29, 30, 31, I keep quantifying because I think you should be progressing and, be maturing. But I think now I'm starting to really be able to embrace the story more. And that's why I was so willing to say, oh, well, that's okay. I'll come on the podcast. You know what? I think I will share my name. And I will give extra details because it's going to help someone. Hopefully, it helps someone else.
And that's a great segue into the next question.
Oh, good.
Right. Thank you. I was recently reading on Facebook, one of my old professor's son was being bullied at school because the kids found out that he's adopted. What advice do you give to kids who were adopted or are adopted, who may be struggling with their identity and struggling with acceptance? What advice would you give them?
Man, I wasn't prepared for that question because I think a lot of those feelings I just suppressed for so long. I think if I could do it again, or if I was able to talk to my younger self, which would be in terms of advice, for me, I would have said that it's nothing to be ashamed of. And I would have been more sensitive to the fact that this is something that adoption is more of a selection process and more of a special process. It makes you a novelty in a sense, where as I said earlier, you're not born to just a family. A family chooses you. And It's tough because as I said earlier,